There was a principle that was taught to me by an American. He was a scholar at Princeton University. Princeton University is one university in the United States that's attracted some of the smartest people in the world, including Albert Einstein, the people who worked on the atomic bomb back before World War II. It attracted, although I'm not a big believer in the atomic bomb, it attracted some of the smartest men and women on Earth. And so that university is known for its academics. It's known for attracting very smart people. Michael went to Princeton. And without any necessity of leaving, he found himself speaking to someone outside of the classroom who invited him to go to India. Now, just months before he lost his brother, he lost his mother, he lost a friend, they died all within a few months. And so the gentleman that he saw outside the classes was of Indian descent, and he said, if you want to find out what did hook up with these Tibetan monks from Tibet and ended up in a monastery, not for one, not for two, not for 3, not 5 years, not 10 years, not 15, but 20 years in a monastery called Saramay, famous monastery in Tibet. And he learned Buddhism through the lamas and the monks in that monastery. Now, what does this have to do with business? Everything. Because for 20 years, for a Westerner to end up as the first Westerner to be indoctrinated as a geshe, which in Buddhism is the highest order, it's the PhD in Buddhism. Now, it doesn't matter what spiritual tradition that any of us are in. What's important is when someone studies for a long time, there's a certain honor that is bestowed upon them. Would you agree? And so 20 years is a long time. And so when he came out of the monastery, he landed back in the United States, and because of the Chinese invading Tibet, most of the Tibetan monks had left, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Well, the highest Lama at the time in Buddhism practice was the Lama that Michael had studied under. And of all places to be, he was in a little city in New Jersey, United States. It's a little state by New York, New Jersey. And it was a little city called Howell, New Jersey. And this Lama's name was Ken Rinpoche. He was the highest, they call him root Lama, like the root to a tree. He was the highest Westerner to be indoctrinated as a geshe, which in Buddhism is the highest order, it's the PhD in Buddhism. Now, it doesn't matter what spiritual tradition that any of us are in. What's important is when someone studies for a long time, there's a certain honor that is bestowed upon them. Would you agree? And so 20 years is a long time. And so when he came out of the monastery, he landed back in the United States, and because of the Chinese invading Tibet, most of the Tibetan monks had left, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Well, the highest Lama at the time in Buddhism practice was the Lama that Michael had studied under. And of all places to be, he was in a little city in New Jersey, United States. It's a little state by New York, New Jersey. And it was a little city called Howell, New Jersey. This Lama's name was Ken Rinpoche. He was the highest, they call him root Lama, like the root to a tree. He was the highest Lama in a very common place, which is beautiful because that's how most things are in circumstances like this. So Ken was his name, and Michael lived with him for many years. And then one day, after meditation, Ken Rinpoche, Michael's Lama, said, I think you ought to go into the diamond business. Let's see if this karma in dealing with what you've learned has practical application. If you're in a monastery, you're not with anyone in business or the outside world. But if you're actually in business to see if these principles that you've learned over 20 years apply. Well, then let's see if it works. And this is an ancient, tradition. A lama telling a young man, a Westerner, back in his mother country to go into the diamond business. Now, the diamond business in the United States is very, very family-centered, because if it isn't, then you could take an entire $2 million inventory of diamonds out of your pocket and you can walk right out. No one will ever know the difference. So it's mostly families that run the diamond business in New York, and Michael was not of the spiritual tradition of these families, and also was not of the same culture of these families in New York City. So it was tough enough to get into the diamond business. So Michael didn't want to go in because he indicated that he didn't know diamonds from golf balls. But as it turns out, he had to say yes because his teacher, his lama, right, is telling him to do it. So he did it, and he got in. Now the karma, I believe it's the translation is close to khush nasibi, something like that. Karma is Sanskrit, an ancient language. The karma that was forced upon Michael was working in this business that started with 3 people in New York City, and it soon became, within a decade, the fastest growing manufacturing company in the history of New York City. In fact, a decade later, this little diamond business, started by Michael and 2 other associates, using the principles he learned in Tibet that have been taught for 2,500 years, that's no different than most spiritual traditions, including your own or mine. He applied it to business, and Warren Buffett bought the company for $250 million, $250 million. Now, why do I tell you that story, and why did I take the time? If you're still listening and watching me, then there's a good reason for you, and I'm glad you did, because what my teacher, Michael, did, and he wrote a book, and he wrote a couple of books, and they were national bestsellers, and big companies and multimillionaires, $100, $200 million companies started following his work. And it's called karmic marketing. Now, I renamed it karmic marketing. Michael named it karmic management, managing your affairs through the power of karma. And if I could tell you the way it works right now, it's very, very simple. So imagine that you are in the middle of a hub, like in a bicycle wheel. And imagine that there are 4 other hubs at, like a clock, at 12 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock, if you can see it. And they're all connected to you in the middle. You, by yourself, Michael, in this case, is little you, or it's called little me. Now, at 3 o'clock on a clock, right, at the 3 o'clock point, that little ball is considered, and we have a 1-page outline of this that you'll be provided so you see it, but at 3 o'clock, at that point, that's called your customers. And what do you do with your customers? I'll tell you in a moment. At 6 o'clock, at the bottom, they're your suppliers or vendors, the people you buy things from. At 9 o'clock, on the other side of 3, those are your team members, your company, your employees. They include your family and your sphere of influence, the people that is in your network. And then at 12 o'clock, that's the world. That's the rest of the world. It could be foundations. It can be nonprofit. It could be whatever else is not part of your customer base, your suppliers, or your team members and family. You got it? Is that clear? So now what do you do with those 4? You are in the middle. What do you do with those 4? What did Michael do so that Warren Buffett could buy a company now eventually with 10,000 employees starting from 3? It grew very, very quickly using these ancient principles. Well, all he did is work with 4 different groups of people: the customers, the suppliers, the employees, and the rest of the world. And every single day, he showed them appreciation, appreciation in the English language means to expand, right? Depreciation in an economy, or depreciating someone means to collapse, right? So if something's expanding, it's growing. If something's collapsing, it's wilting or dying, right? Like a flower that wilts. So every single day, and this is the cause for my business to grow, he finds 2 people in each of those 4 areas. Customers, which people only deal with. Suppliers, which people mostly ignore. Are you nice to your suppliers? Most people aren't nice to their suppliers. They're negotiating with their suppliers constantly. But appreciating them, thanking them, showing gratitude towards them. This may sound silly, but you can't argue with $250 million or Warren Buffett, the world's smartest investor. And then your employees. Many people abuse their employees. You know, many people don't think their employees are doing their job, so they don't appreciate them. Now, the reason you need to appreciate them, because karma, or hush nasibi, if it translates to you, now, forgive me, my accent is very strong, American accent, but I believe that what goes around comes around. So as you give, right, it comes back, and not usually from where you gave, from other sources. So every single day, I've taught my students, some of them are very well known and are multi-millionaires. I have 2 billionaire clients. And every day I've done this because I modeled what my teacher Michael did, is 2 people within the customer base that we have, 2 suppliers, 2 family members or employees, and 2 people within the world. We do random acts of kindness. That's it. Randomly appreciating them. Now, why should such a simple thing take so much time to explain? That's a question you should be asking yourself, because this is the longest explanation I'll have throughout this time that we spend together, is because, like the game of chess, it's simple but not easy to do. To understand it is simple, but to do it every single day, every single day. Now, if you have a Sabbath where you have time off because of your spiritual practice, then that's fine, but I do it 7 days a week. Every single day, between prayer, every single day. 2 people. And we start with 1, because it's difficult, and then we go to 2. Day after day after day. 2 customers, 2 suppliers, 2 employees, 2 people from the world. Now, sometimes the world is limitless, but you may run out of customers, you may run out of employees and family members, and you may run out of suppliers, so you go back to who you gave to before. And as you're doing this, there's what's called this karmic echo. So when you go into a canyon, you hear an echo, and it's like a nest, and it echoes, echoes, echoes. And little you in the middle, if you do all 4, becomes big you. And when you find someone else who's doing the karmic marketing way, now some people don't just do it naturally. They don't do it being taught by me. They just naturally do this. But all 4 categories, then if your big nest of influence collides with another nest, now you really have something. And your business will grow and grow and grow when you teach your own people to do the same. And all you're doing is appreciating them. You're thanking them. You're finding something positive to say, because there's plenty of negative things to say. And you don't even have to believe in it. Now, if you believe in it, it'll work even faster. But if you don't believe in it, it'll still work. I know, because I've taught people who don't believe. And it still works. Because what I did is I dangled money in front of them. I said, do it for a year and watch what happens. It starts working within 3 months. Now, I know one thing about cause and effect. A tiny cause always creates a massive effect. A tiny acorn creates a massive oak tree. Here in California where I live, a tiny redwood seed can grow after 1,500 to 2,000 years into a massive tree that's 300 feet tall. You can drive a car through it if you carved out the middle. So little things cause big effects. The atom is tiny, but when it's split, it can explode and cause massive destruction, going back to Princeton where we started. So what I say to you, although we've never met, and I'm a little vulnerable to you right now because I'm talking about something that I can't necessarily prove I can only provide you evidence. Karmic marketing works, and it doesn't cost anything. There's no marketing budget needed. There's no operations budget needed, and there's no production budget needed. And you can do it secretly and watch your company grow. If you allow me to show you how to do it, then maybe you can grow without putting any more money into your company faster, better, and easier, because you align yourself with the laws of nature. And that is the purpose of business. For me, is to have a significant legacy that you leave behind for your family to enjoy when you're no longer living.